Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Now, I'm sure you guys have noticed lately that I've been making videos with leftoids going silent. This individual was left speechless, was left silent, left in shock after being asked a very simple question. Now, of course, there's two reasons why I've been making those videos a lot. First of all, because you guys click on them and you seem to love them, so I'll just keep producing them, and if they're performing well, then I'll keep using the framing. Business is business, and this is, after all, to a certain extent, the entertainment business. But it's not just a good marketing strategy that generates clicks, it's also something that keeps happening over and over again. There's so many of these events that keep popping up where leftoids, activists, or people on CNN and MSNBC panels are left completely speechless when challenged in the simplest way or asked a simple question. And it all boils down to the same concept I always refer to. Leftoids, your rhetoric and your attitude within the world of politics is nothing if not self-righteous. I am right. Everybody agrees with me, every Bernie Sanders supporter tells you. The majority of the American people overwhelmingly agree with my policies and positions, is what they tell you. My apologies once again for that absolutely terrible Bernie Sanders impression, but you get the point. But then why is it that their ideas, when you really delve down into it, most of the time are totally unpopular when you actually pay attention to the nuance? And more specifically, why is it that their arguments or their talking points on their particular stances and policies fall apart instantly? Well, it's very simple, folks, because their ideas suck, and there's really no other way to say it. And man, was that proven during the most recent Senate committee hearing on the issue of abortion in Roe v. Wade. Let me show you guys this interaction with a woke liberal law professor. We got some stuff to get into, folks, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so as you'd expect from the lefties, whenever they need to make their case, whenever they're fighting for something, they always bring their best and brightest, right? Oh, well, not exactly. They brought in law professor Khiara Bridges from the University of California, Berkeley, who of course has a septum ring. This is her. And so instantly, you know you're dealing with a very, very woke legal professor who, instead of interpreting the law, is of course pushing left-wing activism. Well, Republican Texas Senator John Cornyn, let's just say he had her cornered, pun intended. You are totally free to dislike the video right now. I won't hold it against you. Take a look at this.
Lead lives that are filled with dignity and humanity.
And
that
to
means
your,
being able
your way
to,
of thinking, that happens when more black babies are aborted.
I believe, I trust, I love black people with the capacity for pregnancy. I think they have agency, they have intelligence, they know what is best for themselves, and I would love to create the conditions under which they can live lives that are filled with dignity and humanity.
And do you think a baby that is delivered alive has value?
Yes.
Do you think that a baby that is not yet born has value?
I believe that a person with a capacity for pregnancy has value. They have intelligence, they have agency, they have
I'm talking
dignity.
about the baby.
And I'm talking about the person with the capacity for pregnancy.
You're not answering the question. I'm asking.
I'm answering a more interesting question to me.
Do you think that the baby that is not yet born, let's say the day before this mother delivers, do you think that baby has value?
I think that the person with the capacity for pregnancy has value, and they should have the ability to control what happens to their lives.
Well, and I just note you refuse to answer the question.
I mean, he set up that trap so perfectly and showed just how easy it is for left-wing arguments to fall apart. Do you think a baby delivered alive has value? Law professor Khiara Bridges responded yes. If she was really smart, if she was really witty, and on top of it, she would have instantly said, I see where you're going with this, and I won't play into your game, but she said yes, and so she engaged, and now she must follow up. And when questioned, do you think that a baby that is not born yet has value, she immediately pivots to the same talking point that she kept repeating over and over again during the entire hearing. Something about agency and free will of pregnant individuals. Of course, we cannot say women anymore, at least not at the University of California in Berkeley. And so it takes me back to the same point. Who do lefties think that they're convincing with these arguments? I mean, that's not an argument. You seem like more of a politician than anything else. Life is precious and important, right? Lives matter, right? Yes. What about unborn life? Well, actually, women and agency and all, and, freedom to snuff out a life at your own convenience. What a terrible argument. Not exactly the greatest legal whiz I've ever seen in my life. I guess she doesn't see the irony going into her diatribe about agency and all. Speaking of agency, speaking of being able to make your own decisions and guide your own life, you could choose not to get pregnant. I mean, it's actually pretty easy. You have the agency to be a responsible adult human being who doesn't rely on snuffing out life as contraceptive. And instantaneously, leftoids will go, oh, but what about cases of incest and RAPE? Yeah, well, nobody is arguing that. I don't even know what you're talking about. Not to mention it's less than 1% of cases. And most Republicans would agree with you that, yeah, probably, women shouldn't be forced to take that to term. Some people would disagree, but for the most part, I think that's a relatively decent common ground or middle ground that people will meet you on. In fact, I'd say probably a lot of Republicans are willing to stop at 6 weeks. Getting a little bit off topic, but agency, I mean, what an argument. It's almost as bad as Governor Gavin Newsom attacking Ron DeSantis over the idea of freedom. It's just stupid. That's not your argument. That's the argument for the other side. What liberals want is agency without personal responsibility. And so they're not convincing anyone. They're liars and they're extreme, and they have this arrogant tone of I'm right about everything and everyone agrees with me, and then you ask them the most simplest question, or you catch them on a little fallacy, and the whole thing falls apart. They're like a deer caught in the headlights with that oh crap look on their face when their eyeballs all of a sudden open up real wide, and they look like a little mouse caught in a mousetrap. Oh, where do I go from here? He got me. Let me resort to my NPC talking points. 1, 2, 3. Women's rights. Actually, women don't actually exist. Malfunction. Not exactly sure what the sound I just made was, but you get the point. All of a sudden, they resort to their NPC pseudo-intellectual academic talking points, their programming, and the whole thing falls apart. And we see it with the whole women thing. The SCOTUS decision on Roe v. Wade is released, and all of a sudden it's women this, women that. Who were you just telling us a couple weeks ago how women don't actually exist? Or that womanhood cannot be defined? And yes, I get the point that women is actually an exclusionary term, and that we should use birthing people instead to encapsulate everybody on the spectrum. But that's not the point. The point is that there's just so much inconsistency. There's so much religious ideology, and I call it religious because being a leftist these days, and especially being an academic intersectionality leftist, I mean, it's a dogmatic religion. It's nothing but belief. Democrats are always advocating for the separation of church and state, but if you really think about it, everything that defines their viewpoints is really from the church of woke. They're the ones trying to mix their religious ideology with government and governance, not the people they're pointing the finger to. And this was fully exemplified during this very weird interaction at the start of this Senate hearing event.
Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley. So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing them.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
I mean, this is a law professor. This is somebody who's supposed to be objective. We're supposed to be talking about the constitutionality of Roe v. Wade. And she just goes into this long-winded intersectionality cultural Marxist monologue, and instantaneously, in my opinion, she discredits herself. You can't be taken as a serious legal scholar who's objective and neutral and just purely analyzing the facts if all you're really doing is promoting and pushing left-wing ideology. And this is all too often what we see with the left. Once again, they accuse Justice Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett and Clarence Thomas of being ideologues sitting on the bench, but really what they're doing is interpreting the Constitution. And we've seen it because they've ruled in favor of the left on many occasions where they probably personally disagree with the ruling. But when it comes to these leftoids, these leftoid politicians, but especially these leftoid lawyers and legal scholars, it's nothing but activism above all else. I mean, for Pete's sakes, newly appointed Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, when questioned, couldn't even define what a woman is. That is left-wing ideology, and left-wing academic ideology, dogma, and beliefs on the activist left define and guide everything. It's just a mess. It's not about facts, it's not about data, empirical evidence, it's about feelings and beliefs. And that's why their arguments and their talking points always fall apart at the lightest level of scrutiny. That's why they're always left silent. And I'm making these videos over and over again. You can't be so arrogant and self-righteous in your beliefs if you can't defend those beliefs against the most basic, lightest of questioning. Thanks for watching, folks, and I'll see you on the next one.